At 3:47 a.m. on May 6, 1943, Lieutenant James Walker was on the bridge of the destroyer HMS Hesperus, scanning the black waters of the North Atlantic. Just 200 meters away, something was moving beneath the surface, a dark, silent, deadly shadow. It was a German U-boat. And it was hunting. Walker knew he had only seconds before the submarine fired its torpedoes. The standard procedure was to drop depth charges and pray they hit something in the dark. The chances of success? Less than 2%. But that morning, the Hesperus carried something different. Something German admirals considered technically impossible. Something that, upon hearing the rumors, Karl Dönitz, the commander of the U-boat fleet, would have called a pathetic British decoy. A device that could see through the water. In 1943, the Battle of the Atlantic was being lost by the Allies. German submarines, the feared U-boats, were sinking merchant ships faster than shipyards could build them. By March of that year, 108 Allied ships went to the bottom of the ocean. That meant one ship sunk every 7 hours. England was on the brink of surrender due to lack of supplies. The problem was simple: U-boats were invisible. They attacked at night, submerged, and then disappeared into the depths. To destroy a submarine, Allied warships had to guess where it was and launch depth charges blindly. On average, it took 250 depth charges to sink a single U-boat. Most ships were destroyed before they could fire that many. The Germans knew this. Their commanders had studied Allied tactics and knew every limitation. Karl Dönitz, the architect of the submarine campaign, even declared, "The Atlantic is our hunting ground. The British are shooting in the dark." But in April 1943, something changed. The project had begun in 1940 with a seemingly insoluble problem: how to detect a submerged metal object in murky waters, at night, without seeing it. The theoretical solution was obvious: use sound waves. Sound travels well underwater. If you emit a sound pulse and it bounces off something solid, like a steel hull, you can calculate the distance and position of the target. The problem was that this required technology that simply did not exist. When the project was presented to the British Admiralty, the initial response was unanimous: impossible. Detecting a submarine 2,000 meters away would require acoustic emitters powerful enough to penetrate ocean currents, yet sensitive enough to capture weak echoes. Moreover, the equipment would need to distinguish between a submarine, a school of fish, debris, or thermal variations in the water. But Dr. Robert Watson Watt, a physicist at the University of St. Andrews, and his team would not accept impossible as an answer. They worked 24 months in absolute secrecy. They developed piezoelectric transducers capable of emitting directional ultrasonic pulses. They created tube amplifiers that could detect echoes as short as 0.3 seconds. They designed filtering systems that eliminated ambient noise. The result was called ASDIC, Anti-Submarine Detection Investigation Committee. The device was mounted on the ship's hull and worked by emitting sound pulses in circular patterns. When the sound hit a solid submerged object, the echo returned and was converted into an audible ping in the operator's headphones. Distance, direction, and depth could be calculated in seconds. In August 1942, the destroyer HMS Starling tested the ASDIC against simulated targets in the Irish Sea. 5 submersions. 5 detections. 5 targets destroyed with surgical precision. The Royal Navy cancelled the remainder of the tests and immediately began mass production. But there was a critical problem: absolute secrecy. If an ASDIC unit fell into German hands, Nazi engineers could develop countermeasures: sound-absorbing coatings, specific evasive maneuvers, or even acoustic jammers. The decision was clear: ASDIC would only be used in deep Atlantic waters, where any sunken ship would descend beyond 3,000 meters, inaccessible to the Germans. British naval intelligence officers personally escorted the first 200 ASDIC systems to secret bases in Scotland and Iceland. Only 12 destroyers were initially equipped, including the HMS Hesperus. The crew was trained in absolute secrecy. The equipment was referred to only as Type 271. Not even the sailors themselves knew exactly what it was. The Germans suspected nothing. On the night of May 5, 1943, the HMS Hesperus and 3 other destroyers were escorting a convoy of 37 merchant ships carrying vital supplies from America to England. At 11 p.m., the communications officer intercepted coded radio signals. The U-boats were organizing. A wolf pack of at least 8 submarines was converging on the convoy's position. It was a classic German tactic: U-boats attacking in groups, at night, using the darkness to become invisible. But at 3:47 a.m., something changed. The ASDIC operator aboard the Hesperus, Seaman Dennis Chapman, heard something in his headphones. A sharp ping. Then another. Contact. Bearing 340, range 1,800 yards, estimated depth 60 meters. Lieutenant Walker did not hesitate. He ordered an interception course at maximum speed. The Hesperus cut through the waves like a blade. 1,500 yards. 1,200 yards. 900 yards. The pings got faster. The echo was getting stronger. The submarine was there, trying to dive deeper, but it was too late. At 400 yards, Walker ordered, drop depth charges. 6 200-kilogram cylinders of explosives were launched in a circular pattern around the U-boat's exact position. The explosions lit up the ocean. Seconds later, metal debris, diesel oil, and pieces of wood rose to the surface. U-638 destroyed. Time from detection to sinking, 4 minutes and 22 seconds. The Hesperus crew was stunned. For the first time in the war, a U-boat had been hunted as prey, not as a predator. But the night was not over yet. Between May 6 and May 12, 1943, something extraordinary happened in the North Atlantic. At 7:15 a.m. the morning after the first sinking, the HMS Starling detected another U-boat at 2,300 yards. 5 depth charges. U-266 destroyed. At 2:30 p.m., the HMS Woodpecker detected 2 submarines sailing together. 8 charges. U-456 and U-528 sunk. At 9 p.m., the HMS Wren detected a U-boat trying to escape at high submerged speed. 4 charges. U-209 destroyed. The Germans began to realize something was terribly wrong. U-boat commanders reported unexplained experiences. We were detected without emitting any sound. The destroyer went straight to our position, as if it knew exactly where we were. Kapitänleutnant Heinrich Bleichrodt, one of the German submarine fleet's aces, transmitted a desperate message: the British destroyers now hunt us with impossible accuracy. It is as if they can see us through the water. German naval intelligence tried to find out what was happening. They analyzed recovered wreckage, interrogated British prisoners, and reviewed technical manuals. The conclusion was unanimous: technically impossible. A Kriegsmarine report from June 1943 stated, rumors among prisoners suggest some kind of acoustic detection. Descriptions are technically implausible. Likely British disinformation. Karl Dönitz, upon hearing the reports, is said to have commented sarcastically, if the British can see through water, then they can also make submarines fly. He was being sarcastic. But by the end of May 1943, 11 U-boats had been sunk in just 7 days, all detected with surgical precision by ASDIC. May 1943 was the turning point of the Battle of the Atlantic. In that month, 41 U-boats were sunk, the highest number in a single month since the start of the war. The sinking rate of merchant ships dropped by 70%. Karl Dönitz was forced to temporarily withdraw all U-boats from the North Atlantic. For the first time since 1939, Allied convoys sailed without fear. German submarines, previously the invisible predators of the ocean, were now the prey. ASDIC found its ideal target in the Type 7 U-boats, the most common in the German fleet. These submarines were fast, but had critical limitations. They could remain submerged for a maximum of 24 hours before needing to surface to recharge their batteries. With ASDIC, the Allied destroyers simply waited. As soon as the submarine surfaced, it was instantly detected and destroyed. Naval historian John Terrain wrote, ASDIC turned the ocean into a floodlit hunting ground. U-boats, once invisible, were now easy targets. Throughout 1943 and 1944, ASDIC was responsible for 68% of all U-boat sinkings, even though it represented only 30% of the ships equipped with anti-submarine technology. Its efficiency was 400% higher than conventional blindly launched depth charges. German confidence in their submarine tactics was completely shattered. At 2:33 a.m. on July 14, 1943, the HMS Hesperus opened fire on U-boats in the Bay of Biscay. The Hesperus was an ASDIC veteran. It had sunk 5 submarines in less than 2 months. Its crew was considered the deadliest in the Royal Navy. But that night, the battle would be different. U-boat U-415, commanded by the experienced Kapitänleutnant Kurt Nide, had learned from his colleagues' mistakes. He knew the British had some form of advanced detection. So, he waited. The Hesperus located U-415 and opened fire with its depth charges. The submarine was severely damaged, but managed to surface and fire one last torpedo before sinking. The torpedo hit the Hesperus in the engine room. The explosion split the ship in half. It sank in less than 9 minutes. 132 crew members died instantly. Only 87 survivors were rescued after 6 hours in the frigid water. The HMS Hesperus, the first destroyer to use ASDIC in combat, now rested at the bottom of the Atlantic. But its technology changed the war. Between May 1943 and the end of the war, ASDIC completely transformed the balance of power in the Atlantic. Against high-speed U-boats, ASDIC-equipped ships needed only 18 depth charges per sinking, while conventional methods required 250. During Operation Overlord, the D-Day landings, ASDIC ensured that no German submarine could attack the invasion fleet. All 12 U-boats that attempted to approach were detected and destroyed before they reached 10 kilometers from the beaches. Admiral Chester Nimitz, commander of the Pacific Fleet, wrote, "ASDIC is the most important weapon of modern naval warfare. Without it, the war would have been lost." By the end of the war, more than 3,800 ASDIC systems had been produced and installed on Allied ships from 14 different nations. The Germans, who scoffed at the pathetic British decoy, never managed to develop an equivalent technology. They tried to create rubber coatings to absorb sound waves, but it was too late. More than 780 U-boats were sunk during the war. Of those, 520 were destroyed with the direct or indirect help of ASDIC. Lieutenant James Walker, who commanded the first successful ASDIC attack, survived the sinking of the Hesperus. He was transferred to another destroyer and continued hunting U-boats until the end of the war. He sank 8 more submarines and was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross. After the war, he became an instructor at the Royal Naval College and trained the next generation of ASW, anti-submarine warfare, officers. When asked about the secret to ASDIC's success, Walker said, "It wasn't just the technology. It was turning the hunters into the hunted. The Germans never expected that we could see them in the dark." Dr. Robert Watson Watt, the physicist who led the development of ASDIC, continued his work on detection technologies. His next project was airborne radar. The HMS Hesperus, the first ship to test the impossible technology, had its wreckage found in 2011, more than 1,200 meters deep in the North Atlantic. Its story was never forgotten. And the pathetic decoy that the Germans mocked? It silenced their submarines forever.